All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming on over on a Friday night. It is, I had to double check because I don't pay attention to the calendar sometimes, January 12th. And we are in a push to get ready for some cold weather for us, cold for us. Coming around Tuesday overnight, we are going to see some single digit temps. So that's kind of been my main focus the last couple of days, make sure we're squared away for that. And I'll get into that a little bit more here in a little bit. In the meantime, I do have a couple of quick announcements to pass along to folks. We're attending Farmstead Friends event. This is kind of a late holiday gathering. As you know, we have to wait for all the usual holiday stuff to get off everybody's calendar. So we're having kind of a early in the year meetup for homesteaders, people who homestead on any scale, are interested in getting into it. And this is actually being put on by a very cool lady named Sandy. And I have already dropped the link. It's a Facebook link for the event in the show notes. This is going to be tomorrow from 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. at a venue in Lenoir City. It's called the Reserve at Bluebird Hill. And I'm just going to read off of her announcement real quick here. If you're passionate about supporting initiatives that promote self-sufficiency, sustainability, and community resilience, then the East Tennessee Homestead Alliance invites you to an intimate private farmstead event where you can network with other homesteading organizations and learn more about our mission and the incredible work we're doing to foster a thriving homesteading community. So again, that's tomorrow, Saturday, 4 to 6 p.m. Bring your notepad, bring your business cards if you're into anything adjacent to the homesteading lifestyle or business world, and meet new folks, and let's help each other out. This is the first event for this organization that Sandy has put together, and I'm just looking forward to seeing probably some new faces and plenty of ones that I already know. We've got one more housekeeping note. Yes, I've started a Telegram group because I kind of wanted to have a little bit of a chat space available all the time for anybody who follows my work, is interested in my work, or kind of anything adjacent to urban homesteading, small scale design, perennial design, off-grid stuff, and just all of the other things that I have an interest in. I figure if I find it interesting, other people probably do too. So I've sent out an invite via my mailing list, my social media, and I have also dropped a link in the notes here. That will be just kind of a casual conversation spot. I don't care what people want to talk about within reason, but I like to share things, like share thoughts I have during the day. I like to share photos of stuff that I'm up to. So it's going to be a hodgepodge, just like the inside of my head. So if you guys are on board with that, come on over and join that Telegram group. Hey, Chris Dixon, I appreciate you popping in. And when I figure out how to show that on the screen, I will. Maybe you can tell me, maybe Tim can tell me. So, like I said, this week has mostly been focused on getting ready for this cold. Last I checked, Tuesday overnight is supposed to be like 7 or something. So, this will happen here, and it doesn't sustain, which is kind of the nice thing. We usually have like 2 or 3 nights that are kind of cold, and then usually after a couple of days, we're actually back up above freezing again. It's unusual for us to have a lengthy time, but even just a short amount of time can cause a lot of havoc, because a lot of people here just aren't prepared for it. They're just not used to it. If they've always been here, if they've moved up from south, it can kind of mess things up. And I think they're kind of starting to say maybe some snow or sleet or ice or who knows. All I know is I'm not planning to go anywhere. I'm gonna stay right here on this hill, but I wanted to make sure that we weren't going to have any issues with house systems or or the sheep. So the sheep, that's new from last year, and the upside is that this is not the first time these sheep have had single digit temps. The same thing happened last year, and while they weren't here, they were somewhere else, and apparently they were fine. So all I'm really going to do is make sure that they've got plenty of cover, which, I mean, they do. They're under a dense stand of cedar trees, which is what my sheep lady Marcy said would be cool. And I'm basically just going to take them a couple extra bales of hay. They're working on a round bale right now, but I've got some square bales, so I'm just going to load those up in the wheelbarrow and take them to their where they like to bed down, and they can just kind of stay a little more grouped to eat, and just have kind of that extra carbohydrate. I'll probably bring them a few scoops of some sweet feed too, because the carbs will help them maintain a higher body temperature, and they'll just make them happy. So I think they'll be fine. I usually, when it gets this cold, I usually just empty their water dish altogether, so I just don't have a block of ice, and then I fill some buckets. We do have some frost-free spigots up here, which is super handy, and I just fill buckets and make a couple of short trips and fill their water and just kind of watch it throughout the day. And they seem to do fine. I mean, we've gotten down into the teens a couple of times this winter already, and me being new to sheep, I go down there and check on them, and they're just hanging out, chewing their cud, just actually looking a little more comfortable than they tend to look in August. So they are sheep, and they are adapted to the cold. So I probably just need to worry a little bit less about them. As far as the house systems, one big improvement that we made back in the spring when we rerouted some plumbing lines was that I put heat tape on everything. So as soon as that water line pops up out of the ground and comes up underneath my house, there's heat tape on it. And then the line that runs to the heater, to the water heater outside and back in, all of that has heat tape. So I did a test today because it does pull combined, all three sections of tape combined pull about 400 watts. And since we're on the solar and on the batteries, I wanted to be wise about that. So I kind of did some calculations about how long I may want to run it. And what I've decided to do is just use my little, what I call my little suitcase generator, which is just a little lightweight 1200 watt generator. And I can just set that out back, plug all that heat tape in, and use that to deal with the lines. I haven't decided if I'm going to try to run it all night or just go ahead and just start it in the morning and let the lines defrost, open up a faucet inside and just let them defrost that way. And I mean, not only did I do frost tape, but I also insulated. So I'm hoping that I'm not going to have a giant tube of just ice, but we'll see. Like I said, this is an improvement from last year. Last year when this happened, I just didn't have water. I just we heated water on top of the stove and washed up that way, and it was mildly annoying. And we had a bunch of stored water in jugs inside, and there were some places that I could get to with the heat gun, but the majority of this water line is in the underside of this cabin, which doesn't have a crawl space. There's about 8 inches between the base of the gravel and the underside. So if that freezes, I simply cannot get to it. So interested to see how that's going to work. I'm pretty happy with the setup so far, especially with the way I've been able to defrost, or I should say drain out the propane water heater, so I don't have that thing rupturing on me. I tested the generator today, put some sea foam in it because it was a little bit sputtery. The carburetor was a little bit unhappy, and after I ran it for about 15 minutes, it was good to go. I filled up the main generator just so I just don't have to do it when it's that cold. In case we do need to charge things up, we only had a little bit of sun today, and then the rest of the day was rainy, and that will I can get those batteries all the way up to 100% on a half a tank. So a full tank is nice should we need it if it stays overcast for an extended amount of time. The thing about having an off-grid system is just that, everything is our responsibility all the time. Now, fortunately, I do have people I can call on and help me sort out issues, which I had this week, and I did track it down. But it's you can't afford to be ignorant on this. You just have to learn how to figure things out, and that's relatively easy these days. Relatively easy with the amount of resources available and whatnot. But I did run into this kind of situation that had me scratching my head for a few days. I noticed that all of a sudden, my batteries weren't happy. They were showing me a state of charge of, say, about 75%, but I had multiple cells. So when I look into my management system software, it shows each individual cell of the battery and it gives you the voltage on it. Some of them were well below what they should have been. And you can pull up a chart and it will give you a like a reference point between the state of charge and the voltage per cell. And mine it didn't add up. And I was beginning to think that maybe I was having just a settings issue, because one thing that is different is that we've got a different inverter than we did last year. We have a newer inverter. It's actually better. It's actually it's in a lot of ways it's hugely improved. Not just because the fan is very, very quiet, which was great. We went from a very noisy fan to a fan I can hardly hear, which is fantastic. But it will it tells me a lot more information, basically. But one thing that I didn't think about was what the setting that, let me back up a minute. It has a setting that tells the batteries to shut off. It will shut off all AC power to the house if the battery voltage drops below a certain level. And that is important because if you continually if you go under voltage on these batteries too often, you can wreck them, and they're expensive, and we don't want to do that. So you can also there is an increased fire danger in some of these if they are under or overcharged. So that's one of the reasons why you have BMS, battery management or battery monitoring system, and you have these kind of safeguards. So because I had the new inverter, I was beginning to think that maybe it was just a setting that was different from the old inverter, that it wasn't relevant because we've only just recently kind of gotten into our short days, cloudy weather, that kind of thing, because everything was great through the end of summer and fall. As soon as it cooled off a little bit and we were having those bright, beautiful days through the fall, everything's happy. So, but actually what I suspect ended up happening, and it was just kind of by happenstance that I noticed this, was that I had a phantom draw on the batteries. I have a freezer that has been running nonstop. And it's one of those things where, the freezer's in my shop, and while we're both in and out of there many times a day, the compressor is quiet enough, and my hearing is kind of messed up, that I didn't seem to notice that it was constantly running. Now, one way I could have stayed on top of this is if I had like a kilowatt meter plugged into that and it calculates it, and I could have looked at that and been like, well, that's way too high. Why is it constantly running? So I started to investigate, and I found a frayed cord near the base, where it goes, in through the back of the unit and then splits off to the thermostat and the compressor and all that stuff. About 50% of that cord was just frayed. It kind of looked like something had maybe pinched it and torn it. I really couldn't tell. So I unplugged it. I taped it up. I plugged it back in, and I turned the thermostat much warmer, and the compressor did kick off. So I'm kind of thinking it's related to the cord. So I've ordered a replacement cord, and I will fix that as soon as it comes. We'll see if that fixes it first. if that compressor kicks off and on as needed, I suspect that's probably the issue. In the meantime, I have actually I've put that freezer on a power strip, and because we're pretty cold right now anyhow, and it's in an unheated space, I just turn it off, and I'll turn it on for about an hour during the day, and then I turn it off again. I've been keeping a check on it, and the thing is full. It is absolutely full of food, so it's not going to defrost easily. So we're just kind of keeping an eye on it. And like I said, the batteries have been normal. They have been performing as expected. So I may still get in there and tweak those settings a little bit, because I think I can safely lower a little bit the cutoff voltage level, but I'm not real worried about it at this time. I think this freezer has actually been our culprit. So that's power systems, guys. That's just kind of how it is. If you were on grid, you would probably just notice that your bill is creeping up, and then you're kind of like, why? And you kind of end up going back and doing the same thing I did. So it's probably a good habit just to take one of those little kilowatt meters, which you can get off brands now that are 20 or 30 bucks. They're very inexpensive, and just, go around and plug them into stuff. And if you're ever thinking about adding solar or any kind of alternative energy options, you need to go around and do that anyhow, because you need to know exactly what everything is drawing, because sometimes you would be surprised. Sometimes it's way more and sometimes it's way less. So don't guess. Use something like that. It'll give you a good ballpark. It's always good to round up a little bit, but it'll give you a good ballpark. So I'm happy to be getting that kind of squared away before this super cold temperature comes in, because it seems like things just kind of stack up a little bit. So the sheep are squared away. Water is squared away. So I did address the gardens today. I've got all of these fall plantings that they were given to me, which was nice. But, I did take a lot of time getting everything kind of tucked into the garden. So I'd really like to get all this stuff through winter. So I took multiple wheelbarrows. It took me about an hour. And I just covered all of these plants that are in the garden with just more leaves. I've already done it once. I decided to do it again. I pulled leaves off the top of the pile, which are like real kind of lofty and loose. And by just kind of piling that onto all this broccoli and kale and cauliflower and, oh man, there's so many, there's 2 or 3 different kinds of Brussels sprouts, all kinds of really good stuff. I just kind of made like this real lofty, airy covering with leaves, and so that creates all these air pockets, and air is actually what causes insulation. The stuff we use for insulation is just ways of making barriers with air gaps in between. The air gap is where a lot of your help is. So I have done that, and we will see. It's also supposed to be really windy, so all that may just, who knows, a lot of it could blow off. But this garden's pretty sheltered, and it's on a downhill, so a lot of the wind kind of scoots over top of it. It's also got some partial buffer from both from the cabin and from the workshop. So having all that kind of loftiness we'll see what happens. It's been raining all day today, so that also makes everything heavy, which is good. And actually, plants that are not thirsty do better in extreme cold than plants that have been dry. Their cell walls are more expanded, and they're just more resilient to the effects of the cold. Andy Eddings has dropped in. Good to see you there, my friend. The catalpa trees, maybe you saw my photo the other day, are doing great. Andy gave me these 2 catalpa trees, and they're heading for 4 feet tall, and they're kind of going to be the northeastern edge of my food forest as they grow. Brian was asking if the repair of the cord resolved the continuous run. It did not. Because all I did was I just decided to cover bare wires because that was freaking me out. So we'll see if installing a new cord fixes that, I may need, maybe it's a thermostat. I'm YouTubing all of this because I'm not an appliance guy. So if you have any thoughts, by all means, I am all ears. Gardens are covered. Food forest is covered, or everything's dormant, everything's mulched. I've got about 8 wine raspberries that I have dug out of other parts of the property. These are amazing raspberries, and I have potted up a bunch of them, thinking most likely I'll probably just transplant them into the food forest. But if I see anybody looking for some, I might just throw them out for some money, because it's also wintertime and I'm a landscaper. So, we've been wheeling and dealing on Marketplace right now. So, but I added them. I've got them in a sheltered area too. And I just kind of heaped a bunch of leaves right on top of them in the pots. Same for a bunch of willow. I've rooted a bunch of corkscrew willow cuttings as well. So, and this is stuff, it's like I've got, 15 minutes of work and all of that. So if they keel over, it's not the end of the world, but I do try to protect things as much as possible. It has to be outside. I just don't have the space. I don't have the space in the shop. And one of these days we will have a kicking greenhouse out here, a partially earth sheltered greenhouse, but we're a couple of years off from being able to get that in. So I believe that is your property update. The job I had on the calendar this week, I did have a job on Wednesday. I've got this really cool lady / neighbor who lives just down the road, and I've been helping her rehabilitate this food forest and other planted areas. She's actually in the city, but it's a really big lot and it backs up to a wooded area. So it feels like you're, kind of out in the sticks a little bit. It's really nice. And I've done a ton of work out there since the fall. And the latest job involves cleaning up about 100 feet of fence line where, as it happens with chain link fence, of course, she shares it with a neighbor. So you can only control so much on one side. And that means privet, honeysuckle, and a whole lot of wild grapevine and a few other things. Big cherry tree had come in. And so she wanted that kind of cleared, and we will do ground cover, like a good woven ground cover, and we will replant a variety of vining things. We're still working on putting that together. Pulled out a bunch of old river rock that was just mostly at this point like buried by leaf duff and grass clippings and everything. Pulled all that out. I will get that laid out and then restacked real nice into a little rock edge, and then we'll just start plugging in a bunch of plants as we go along. They are I'm trying to think. She already had something in there. She had some kind of we found a thornless some kind of thornless blackberry that had been planted in there. So a couple of them came out of the ground when I was pulling out some privet, and that's when I saw them because they were just so covered up with everything else. So I cut those back, transplanted them back into another area of the food forest, and then the ones that were still in the ground, just prune them back a little bit, and we'll get them trained up onto the fence. So that is kind of I've just been doing like a day a week for her, just kind of going out there. We've got a big checklist and we're just going through it and just wearing it out. And this is the only time of year that I will do any kind of land clearing work whatsoever. I can't stand to do it in the summertime. It's too hot. It's too frustrating. But in the wintertime, when it's been wet like this and it's easy to dig, right now, if you have privet and it hasn't gotten huge, and I got one out that was easily like a 4-foot stump, it dug right out with almost no fight at all. So if you're trying to control privet, it seems to dig fairly easily if we've been having a lot of rain. Otherwise, I've got a couple of pending jobs. I'm just kind of waiting on plants to come in. I've got a couple of different people who have ordered stuff that they want planted, and it'll be delivered, later this month or early February. and I'll get them on the calendar. And mostly these are people I've done previous installs for, and they're just expanding, doing more plantings. And it's just a good time to do trees and hardy shrubs and anything that's bare root, anything that's dormant, and is, if you're and it's zone appropriate. As long as you're not trying to, I wouldn't do this when it's 7 degrees, but once we warm back up a little bit, our soil just doesn't actually freeze very hard here. It freezes a couple of inches down, but if you're putting in a big root ball tree or even a bare root tree, you're good to go to plant this time of year. I'm constantly telling people that really wintertime is the time to do trees. I know everybody wants to do them in the spring. That's when everybody wants everything pretty. They've gotten out of their house. They're looking around. They want more stuff in the yard. But unless you're prepared to really stay on top of your irrigation, it might not be the best thing, because that tree is going to have to choose between, do I put my energy into my roots or do I try to bloom? And so if the tree is dormant, all it's going to really think about is, hey, let's make some more roots. And it doesn't have that pressure of, oh, it's warm and it's time to bud out and all that kind of stuff. So that's how I like to look at it. It's kind of a constant push to get people around here to understand, yes, we can plant stuff. We can plant anything that is burlapped, anything that is dormant, anything that is appropriate to our zone, our region, through the wintertime, most of the time. I would say probably the biggest thing to watch for with us, with how wet it can get, is make sure, if you're digging a hole and you get water, don't plant there. I mean, that goes for any time of year, of course, but we do have to watch for, issues that arise from having wet roots. So I would say maybe on a site that has been recently cleared, maybe it's a new build and the soil has gotten compacted and water is remaining in a hole as you're preparing to dig or preparing to plant, I probably wouldn't do that. I would, at bare minimum, find a way to get that water moving on, not just hanging out and rotting out the roots. I've had to address some arborvitae where that happened. So just a thought: get out there and plant some trees, guys. It's easier to dig. It's cooler. I mean, you start out there in a jacket and a hoodie, and before you know it, the jacket's off and you're starting to think about taking off the hoodie, because even if it's 35 degrees and you're digging a hole, you're warm. The last thing I've got today was just kind of a thought that came to my mind while I was working on working out, lifting. So back right before Christmas, I resumed my lifting programming. And yeah, we are now off in not exactly gardening and homesteading territory, but I promise it ties back in. So I had, through the spring and summer, I was so busy. I'm not saying I couldn't have made time, because I could have made the time, but I had decided I wasn't going to make the time to be lifting in addition to the business of the season, training jiu-jitsu 3 or 4 days a week, just the responsibilities of a home and a homestead and family and all that kind of stuff. So I just set it aside and I just didn't do it. And before I knew it, I was sore all the time. And I was starting to think, well, I really need to get back into lifting. And I just didn't do it until right before Christmas. Everything was so sore. I was aggravated with like constant pain between my shoulder blades. I was seeing the chiropractor and nothing was really making it better. And I was like, I probably just need to get back under the barbell and it'll be fine. And it turns out I was right. So what I realized is the kind of programming I follow is it's very simple. And if you want to get into lifting, I highly recommend the methodology called Starting Strength. It is an app you can download. It is a kind of programming that is incredibly simple, incredibly effective, and you will get strong on it. I started it originally when I was 35, and I have run the programming off and on between other kinds of programming ever since. And it's always the one I come back to because it's always the one that works. So you lift 3 days a week, and you do the squat, the bench, the overhead press, and those two alternate, and you deadlift. That's all you do. There is a pull up addition, chin ups, if you want to add that. So 3 days a week. So I usually do like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You do those 3 lifts, you do warm ups, and then you work up to 3 sets of 5 on everything except the deadlift. The deadlift, you do 1 set of 5 because there's no reason to overtrain the deadlift for a lot of reasons. This programming was kind of created by a guy named Mark Ripito. And if you want to enjoy a libertarian based podcast that combines the strength and fitness world with kind of an anarcho-capitalist sort of attitude, you need to listen to Starting Strength Radio. It's really good. If you guys like to listen to Jack Spirko, you're gonna like Rip too. He's so funny, and he's another guy down in Texas, and he's just great. And if you listen, you'll see where I'm getting the comparison. So this has been around, Rip's in his 60s. He's been training this stuff. He's been teaching this stuff. They know it works. This is not gimmicky BS like you see on Instagram. And it's simple and it's effective. That doesn't mean it's easy because you add 5 pounds to your lifts with each session. So, when I restarted back right before Christmas, I think I restarted my squat at like 165 pounds for the max for that first day back. And I was sore. Now I'm 145 pounds. So a 20-pound squat over is, that's nothing. It's really laughable, but you got to start somewhere. And I did 205 today. So I've squatted 3 sets of 5 for 205. And here's what I realized. The amount of time I am actually under the barbell is incredibly short. The length of, especially when I'm talking about the actual work sets. So you have your warm-up sets and then you have your work sets. I want to say last time I timed it, my heaviest squat, 3 sets of 5 took me about 90 seconds, maybe total for all of those. And everything in between is like rest and reset and setting up your lift and loading and unloading plates and all that kind of stuff. So the reason this kind of programming works is because you stress a muscle and the muscle responds to the stress by adapting and growing. And that adaptation and growth does not happen unless you rest between your lifts and between your workouts and you eat appropriately. And sometimes the eating part is what's hard for me, is because I often don't have enough appetite to make up for the caloric count I need to put in to add a lot of muscle mass, which is one of the reasons why I've never been a big guy. It's hard for me to put on muscle mass, but I'm trying, and Angel gets used to me, wanting to eat more food. But all of that work I put in is actually quite short. And all of the growth happens kind of in the background in the rest time. So you could apply this way of thinking to business, to bettering yourself, to any number of things. So you've got you push real hard for a little bit, and then you rest, and you let the action engaged in that push do the work in progressing you forward. And then when you come back to the next round, you are stronger and you are more adapted and you are more educated. And then we just build on that. So that's something to ponder. And that's what I'm going to keep bringing you guys. This is kind of stuff that comes to mind when I'm doing anything, everything, sometimes driving, sometimes walking out in the field, walking the dog, doing whatever. I want to share this stuff with you because I'm pretty sure it comes to me for a reason. Like I feel like, the universe, these things, it's a give and take, communications coming in. And so I feel like it needs to be shared. I don't need to just park it in my head and ignore it. I need to, tell you guys, tell my friends, tell the people who support me and help me out. So, Andy, thank you for this. That is super kind. Um, I'm all in, guys. I'm all in on this. I have decided that this year is really going to be a year of growth for me, for the business. I have had multiple people come up to me that just said, "Hey, you're going to have an amazing year. I just know." So I'm just going to accept that and push forth. I don't have too much else for you tonight. I've got to kind of lock down a few things here overnight before we get too cold, including draining the water heater and all that kind of good stuff. And if you guys need anything, find me on the Telegram group, strongrootsresources@gmail.com. If there's anything you'd like to hear me dig into, talk about, research for you, anything homesteading, anything design, you name it. I'll keep you posted. And in the meantime, you guys have a good night and a good weekend. We'll see you next time.